Welcome back to Talk Today. It's 26 minutes after 6 o'clock. We'll have the papers in just a moment, but here's what else is coming up on the programme today.
Well, one of the most dramatic Premier League games in recent history. Talk Sport's Siobhan Ahern will walk us through last night's Spurs and Chelsea clash just before 7. Ahead of King Charles's first state opening of Parliament as monarch, we're asking whether the usually politically inclined king should steer clear of politics. That's at 7:45. And we'll speak to Labour MP and Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, about Labour's take on the King's speech just after 9 o'clock.
So let's take a look at some of this morning's front pages that are in. The Express is there on the warning from police to call off pro-Palestinian protests planned in London this Armistice Day. The Times newspaper, there it is, front page. Thousands of women at risk of breast cancer could be saved by a new drug costing just 4p a day. And the Mirror, Baroness Michelle Mone is the Mirror's cover star as she admits links to a medical supplier who were paid £200 million during the pandemic.
Well, former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall and former Labour advisor James Schneider are with us for a look through this morning's papers. Good morning, both.
Morning.
Nice to have you back. We're going to start with James, front page of The Telegraph. What have you got for us?
So, Rishi Sunak is going to make going on strike even more difficult in this country. They're trying to say there has to be minimum services on the rail and some other things. So this is classic. Rather than doing anything for the cost of living or sorting out the railways, which are the things that you would do that would prevent strikes and allow people to go about their business in a more affordable way with more money in their pocket, saying, oh, well, actually, when workers stand up for themselves, we're going to make that more difficult. It comes on the back of the recent rail strikes, which you paid for. We all paid for. The ministers was forced to admit that it costs far more to the public to carry on the strike rather than settle, because the government was underwriting the costs for the private rail operators. We have a complete, we will all agree on this, we have a completely balmy privatised rail system in the country. And so, for example, in the pandemic, where people weren't taking trains very much and railway workers' pay was cut in real terms, the company still made a profit. It's a completely balmy system anyway. So rather than doing anything about that or anything for cost of living, they're restricting workers' rights to try to improve their...
Well, you can do both, can't you?
Yeah.
You can do both. It's his job as the Prime Minister to say, we want the trains to keep running, Claire, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for once, I actually agree with the Prime Minister on this. I've hated the strikes like everybody else. It has hit every sector going. If you are working in hospitality, if you are a care worker and you're reliant upon trains, you have been absolutely stuffed by this. And I just think that it's all very well to say that you need to look at rail companies. Yeah, you absolutely do. But you can also put in this minimum service standard to allow the trains to run, because if nobody's going to use the trains, that revenue is going to go down and those people are going to lose their jobs. So you need to look at all sides of this. I don't use the trains as much now because they're more expensive, they're less reliable, and Mick Lynch obviously cancels my services more often than I care to think about. So I like this. I think this is a good way to go for the Prime Minister.
So another part of the problem with this, even on the basis of the things that you want, is at the moment, the government, i.e. the taxpayer, i.e. you and me, we underwrite the train companies in their strikes and their industrial disputes. So that means that they have no incentive to settle with the union, which means the strikes go on for longer and longer. So this, by making it easier for the government to absorb the political pressure of the strikes, because the government gets under pressure on strike days, because, my goodness, I can't get anywhere, what's going on? Making that easier makes it even more likely that we won't have settlements, that strikes will go on for longer, that therefore we'll be paying out of pocket ourselves for longer.
You never, ever get to a proper negotiation either, as we've seen. So the government has been round the table and it has spoken to union leaders and tried to work out an agreement. And that hasn't happened. And the unions walk away and say it's never enough. And then they demand an amount which is ridiculous. So I just don't think that you can say...
in the case of RMT, their demand was actually still a real terms pay cut. They really weren't demanding the earth. They were saying we'll have a real terms pay cut, but just not as big as the one that you're putting on us, and you can't change our shift patterns so that we have to work overtime in particular ways. Like they really didn't operate in an unreasonable way. And the most important thing that they did, I think, for us is to say we want to be negotiating with the government, because it's really the government that's standing behind this, even though it's the privatised companies in between us and the government.
Then I think the government really needs to do something about the privatised companies. I've always said that. I don't think that they work in the best interests of the workers or for the public, but that's a wholly different argument. But just to keep calling strikes because you are unhappy at whatever has been negotiated just brings the country to a halt.
Isn't
I
that
can't
the
see
point
that's
of
good.
strikes, though? That's the very definition of
But
what
then
they
if people are not going to go on trains and that revenue is going to go down, then those people will lose their jobs.
You know, people aren't going on trains at the moment, like you said yourself, because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
It cost me 350 quid if I wanted to go now to visit my parents in Blackpool.
That is
£350.
When you could probably fly there for about 50.
Yeah, well, yeah, precisely. If they hadn't shut down the airport.
For 26.
OK, done. Let's go after the show.
Sort it out.
Cheap at half
They've been
price.
obliged to live in Blackpool.
I know he
love the
did.
place.
Cheap as
Beautiful.
chips.
Yeah.
Fabulous. All right, sorted.
Do you think, by the way, James, just a point on this, I know you're not a natural Keir Starmer supporter, obviously. However, if this dispute is still up and running at the next election and Labour win the next election, we all know there's not a cat in hell's chance Keir Starmer's going to be sitting around the table either with Mick Lynch and any other union leader.
Well, I think they actually have said that they would. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think they have.
But Keir Starmer himself, I mean, as Claire says, we do have ministers sitting around
whoever is
the
the
table.
Transport
Yes.
Secretary is the person who should do that.
Let's move to the Mail. Claire, horrendous story of a veteran getting attacked in Edinburgh. This was a poppy seller.
Yeah, that's right. So this is Jim Henderson, who served with the Army in Northern Ireland. He was a member of the Royal Corps of Signals, which I have a very good family connection to with my father and my grandfather. So I was always really interested to read this. 78-year-old gentleman selling poppies at Waverley Station in Edinburgh, and was punched and kicked from behind by pro-Palestinian supporters. They were having a protest. He was there trying to do his bit for the Royal British Legion, and he was kicked from behind and taken to the ground, and apparently nobody did anything. It was the station staff in the end who came in to save him and pick him up. And I think that we are really setting ourselves up for a nasty, nasty argument this weekend with the divisive language that is being used. We should not forget Armistice Day whatsoever, and British Legion should be able to sell poppies without being threatened.
But crucially, there's nothing pro-Palestine about punching a poppy seller.
No, there absolutely
isn't. Those ideas shouldn't be conflated.
No, but if you're on that,
argument.
if you're in that position, a percentage of people in that position, James, you go on those marches. I don't think for 1 second you'd think of attacking a poppy seller. You're wearing one right now. However, there is a contingent, and it's a sizable contingent of people, not that who are going to punch poppy sellers, but who we saw it at Charing Cross Station at the weekend, who just represent that kind of slightly anti-establishment, anti-British position. So a poppy seller on Armistice Day is classic territory for some people on that side.
Well, no, I don't think so. I'm very sad to see this. It's obviously horrible that that a poppy seller has been punched. And I was at the sit-in in Charing Cross, and they've got a picture of, there were poppy sellers there who, they did look a bit bemused, understandably. There they are, they're selling their poppies, and then suddenly there's 1,000 people around them. But I mean, from what I could see there...
No, they shouldn't have been there, the 1,000 people around them. They shouldn't have been anywhere near poppy sellers.
They were buying poppies here. They were buying poppies.
They were not. They hadn't gone in there to buy poppies.
Hold on.
Come on, James.
No. Hold on. Come on in.
Defend this position if you can.
Of course. Hold on. The protest in Charing Cross was a good and perfectly respectable thing, calling for a ceasefire. They weren't going there to do anything against poppy sellers.
It wasn't a respectable thing. Firstly, they were in a railway station. Get out the railway station. You've got no right to be in a railway station protesting, for goodness sake. It's people trying to commute. That's the first thing. Secondly, why gather around?
It was a Saturday at 4
Charing
PM.
Cross is always busy. It's post-football around about that time. And poppy, why would you have a crowd of one protest around a campaign organisation that's trying to raise retain awareness?
So, Ian, you're completely misconstruing this. entirely. The poppy sellers happened to be in the station. They weren't.
No, they will always be in the station at this time of year. They will always be
yes,
there.
of course.
It's like saying they also targeted
But my
prep
point is
workers.
that the poppy sellers and the protests, in the case of the Charing Cross one, didn't come together in any way. Whoever happened to be in the station, whether they worked there, whether they were passing through, whether they were selling coffees or poppies, were there when the protests were taking place. And of course, people have a right. We have freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, supposedly, in this country. And of course, people have a right to protest against our government.
I'm not even sure you have a right to protest on a railway station anyway.
You have a right.
That's another issue, but about private property.
We have a right to protest. And then when the police moved everybody on, everybody left.
But
it was a perfectly peaceful, well-organised, between both the police and the
I don't dispute it was peaceful, but James, when you went in to Charing Cross Station and realised that as one of the biggest stations in the capital city, clearly there's always a big focus on selling poppies in that area. Wouldn't you have gone, do you know what, this is not the place to conflate these two causes. So let's get the...
Armistice or ceasefire?
Let's get the heck out.
Okay,
let's get the heck out. They're clearly not the same thing.
No. Firstly, two things. One, there are 3 poppy sellers in the station on a table together. I'm sure they wouldn't have even been seen by the first protesters coming in, firstly. And secondly, exactly as Nicola said, what could be more appropriate on the day in which we commemorate,
You're an intelligent man. That is
on the day in which
it means the same thing. Clearly, at the moment, it does. In years to come, maybe we will see a conflation.
It's a call for peace.
Hold on. What is it that we recall on Armistice Day? What is it that we recall on Armistice Day? What happened at 11 a.m.
So we're commemorating our war dead, OK?
Right.
And it's not
But
just for the First and Second World War.
The reason why we do it at that time is because the guns fell silent to end World War I, to end the killing. And we use that moment when we managed to get peace to commemorate our war dead. And what the protest seeks to do on Saturday
is have sort of an anti-Israel pro-Palestine. It is a bit of that, though.
It's a ceasefire. What is the top slogan for it? Ceasefire now. Stop the killing in Gaza. Let the guns, let the bombs fall.
I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that. But I think there is an underpinning of controversy that is irredeemable here. And
so the
when you were around at that time,
has been created by our government and the media in trying to suggest that the cenotaph is being targeted, the protests are going nowhere near, that they're going to disrupt anything that happens. They start after the minute of silence, that they're going to be dangerous and they're going to be arrested. There are fewer arrests as a proportion at the protests we've seen so far than at a football match. So the idea that this is frightening, violent, any of these things it's an attempt to construe ordinary British people, and hopefully there will be a huge number of them, who want to see a ceasefire in West Asia. It is a perfectly decent, reasonable thing to do.
Do you think that going into a railway station and sitting down and causing the amount of grief just to ordinary people trying to get on with their lives? I don't disagree with protests. I think you have the right to protest, the freedom to do so, and I'm glad this country has it. But when you start looking at railway stations and causing the amount of grief, I think it takes away from the message that they're trying to get across. And wholly they're peaceful, but there are also those pockets of people who are just there to cause a fight, just there to cause aggro.
Well, but of course, you know, protests they're designed to be disruptive in some way, shape or form. But we're going to move on to a different form of transport now. We're talking about planes, because Prince Harry and Meghan have been branded eco-hypocrites after travelling to a Katy Perry concert on a private plane. What can you tell us about this story?
Well, we were chatting about this beforehand, Claire and I, and I don't understand the culture war to do with Harry and Meghan. It's one of the sort. I look at it and I try to work out how to be angry about it or how to think, oh no, that's really good what he's done, and I just can't get it. To me, it's like Harry and Meghan are two rich and famous people doing things that rich and famous people do. Do I particularly like doing those things? Would I fly in a private jet to a Katy Perry concert? No, I wouldn't. But am I surprised?
Oh, you would, James.
You'd get the train.
What an evening that would be. You get the bubbles when you get on the plane. Fantastic. Bit of Katy Perry at the other. What's not to like about that?
But Claire, is this eco-hypocriticism? Is that a word?
The greatest crime.
I liked
You
it.
know, James and I were talking. I don't care about Harry and Meghan. I have to make that blatantly clear. But if you're going to set your stall out by looking at the climate, then travelling by private jet probably not the best way forward. But I can't see him in line for the American version, sort of EasyJet, waiting to board with everybody else. Of course, he's going to go by private jet. They have the money to do so. If they want to spend it that way, great. Don't lecture me about climate change at the same time.
Fair enough.
That's all I can think about.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much to Claire and James. They will be back in just under an hour.